this is Kermit the Frog.
Fascinating. I'm Captain Kirk.
Magic is always there, as long as we keep looking for it.
Engage.
What does God need with a starship?
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
I protest. I am not a merry man.
Places, please. And here we go.
Down at Fraggle Rock.
Welcome, Doozers, Gorgs, Trash Heaps, Altechians, and things to episode 123 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Jarman.
I'm Steve, and that's actually episode 132.
Whoops. My dyslexia I don't have went into full
It's
force
okay.
there.
Just for a short moment. 132, though. I'm Steve, by the way. We are on a journey across the stars to compare and contrast the creative worlds of Jim Henson and Gene Roddenberry.
And what started as reviews of The Muppet Show and Star Trek the original series has expanded into outer space.
And this week we have Fraggle Rock episode Don't Cry Over Spilt Milk and Next Generation episode The Outrageous Okona.
But before we do that, we actually have some feedback. So I got...
Oh my friggin' God.
I know, it's crazy.
Like 42 episodes or something. Feedback.
I got a random email from a man named Rod Simmons. And I'm not sure where he listened to the episode because he emailed us, which is great. But maybe he's starting from the beginning. I'm not sure. But he commented on our very first episode where we review the unaired pilot of the Cage. And I'm guessing episode 1 of the Muppets. And he said in his comment, the Cage, the unaired episode, it is the remastered version. I said, like, I hate to tell you, but on Netflix, that episode of Star Trek titled The Cage.
Yeah, because at that point I was watching on Netflix and you were watching on something.
Yeah.
And you were seeing the originals and I was seeing the remastered. And so sometimes I was like, that one effect was really good. And you were like, no, Steve.
And I kept thinking to myself, maybe I commented, I don't remember on that episode. Maybe I said like they never did remaster The Cage, but I'm glad they did. I don't remember that. But yeah,
well,
he sent us a link.
So long ago, Rod.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. But he sent a link of the original version, which is still on YouTube, apparently in its entirety. So you can watch it there without the remastered effects and such. But that is pretty cool. But yeah, I'd sent him an email back saying, well, we're going to talk about your email on our 132nd episode. So he might not get here for a while if he's going from the beginning.
Well, thank you, Rod. Maybe you'll skip to this and hear this. Or maybe you'll hear it 5 years in the future. We're going to find out.
Or he's really good at binging and he'll get to it in like a couple weeks.
Yeah, man. Maybe this guy doesn't sleep.
I know I don't.
That's right.
But I think that means I want to rock.
I want to rock. This is That Rocks. There are many gems, jewels, and geodes in the world, many of which can probably be found down in Fraggle Rock. This week's gem is, or geode, whatever, rock of some sort, is andalusite, because it's named after the Andes Mountains or something. This mineral is rarely found in gem form, but when it does, it ranges from like greens and browns, like weird purple hues and stuff. It's real crazy. And while beautiful, they're not really used in jewelry. And if anywhere, they're in collections. What they are commonly used for is because they are incredibly efficient at reflecting heat. They are often what's used as refractory stones in kilns. Where they hot fire things because they're really good at just rejecting heat. So yeah, that's andalusite, and that rocks.
That rocks.
I want to rock!
And I had to look it up as usual, as I usually do every week, and it's very interesting looking. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just peculiar.
Interesting. Learning so much, folks.
That's right. Well, this week, on this week's episode of Fraggle Rock, we're going to start with, what's up, Doc? Well, Doc has discovered a blower noisemaker that he even comments there's like not a name for the thing. And he uses it to tease Sprocket. Later, he invents a blower mouth organ thing and then a hand pump version of it. It's like Doc is kind of an evil genius.
Yeah, really is.
It's all kind of befuddling, but this is actually kind of insane. The mail arrives. They throw out a letter from Uncle Traveling Matt. Gobo grabs it because he's in their world for at least part of this episode. And then they debut a fully mechanized version of his blower orchestra machine. It is just incredible. And Doc declares that the piano is obsolete. And Sprocket could not give a shit.
In fact, he's unhappy about it.
He is unhappy / does not care. What's going down in Fraggle Rock? Well, Gobo and Wembley go to retrieve Uncle Traveling Matt's postcard when Doc loses his new prize into the hole in the wall, which is a blower thing, and he decides he's finally going to board that hole up. Gobo is trapped. Wembley goes to get help. The other Fraggles decide that the only thing they can do is sing about it, and they sing like a really sad bluesy song called Feels So Bad, which turns into like an upbeat, almost spiritual kind of feel at the end. Each Fraggle deals with the loss of Gobo in their own way. Moki sings about it, and she doesn't know what she's going to do. Boober heads back to the exit to outer space, and he simply just cries, Gobo! Somebody save Gobo!
That's not very helpful, is it?
It's the saddest thing, and I love it. Wembley and Red go to see the trash heap. She is crying because she spilt her last bit of milk. Philo and Gunge, who are the two little rat guys, tell her not to cry over spilt milk. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's the wisdom for the day, Fraggles. Don't cry over spilt milk. So they leave thinking that's genius. Boober just laments that they would need a huge rock to get through the door when a huge rock literally shows up. And the Doozers have constructed like a trebuchet, not like a
catapult.
Like a catapult. And so then we cut back to Gobo and Uncle Traveling Matt's postcard out in outer space, which got thrown away. We'll talk about that later. It's a real good time. The two groups back in the rock converge. One with the catapult and the other one carrying spilt milk that they're not crying over. Gobo does his darndest to pry nails, but he's too small. The monster sprocket comes at him. Just then, Moki grabs the boulder, slips on the spilt milk, knocking Boober into the catapult, who is bodily launched through these boards, breaking them, allowing Gobo to escape. Boober is most certainly horribly injured.
Horribly.
Most certainly. With Gobo out, and they're so excited, they instead of singing Feel So Sad, they sing Feel So Glad. And it's an upbeat and making it clear that all of a sudden everyone's all back to good now. Feel so glad. So Jeremy, what did you think of this week's episode of Fraggle Rock? It was a little crazy.
Yeah, as soon as they got boarded up in there, I'm like, they should just ask the Doozers for help. And then I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad the Doozers came into play here, because
thank God these Fraggles would not survive.
I was like, of course, this is a Doozer problem. One thing I thought was an adorable moment, there were a couple in this episode, was Gobo dancing under the box when he was playing the blower machine, or he's like playing it and he's like, you see his little feet under the box dance, like, yeah, even in a scary situation, Fraggle's got to dance like that.
That's right. They can't resist.
It was so cute. And the way a lot of things were weird at first about this episode, because it seemed like Red was explaining the trash heap to Wembley, like we were seeing it for the first time. And I realized, looking at trivia, because I had to look it up, that this was the second episode filmed, but it was aired later on, which makes a lot more sense, because she was explaining it all like the Gorgs, like it was the first time we were seeing them. It was like,
and we haven't seen the trash heap really in a while.
That's true. But, and also, I don't think we've ever gotten their names before, that those creatures have names that hang out with the trash heap.
Yeah, Philo and Gunge.
Do we ever hear that again? Like,
I'm sure we do. They have names now, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Philo and Gunge.
And we can keep track of it.
Yeah, exactly. And also it was cute that Doc got a letter from Kermit. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did hear that. Oh, Kermit.
Oh, gosh, great. A letter from Kermit. He puts it down. And we'll get to the silly creatures, but I really thought it was adorable that he made friends with the sidewalk creature. But yeah, I don't know. What did you think of this episode?
So I agree. There were a lot of sort of weird angles. We've never gotten this big of a plot with Doc before. And for it to be this crazy blower thing was just kind of on a different level. I did like that we got to see the Fraggles without Gobo.
Yeah,
like what
true.
they kind of did when they didn't have their obvious leader to give them some sort of course, and they all kind of literally stumbled into a solution. I feel like the Boober was like physically just destroyed that wall. And you have to think about like how fast was he going to do that? Somebody save Gobo!
I need Gobo.
Favorite moments. And I agree, the Doozers coming at the end were just sort of the perfect little capper. This one has some really good moments, but I think there are some other episodes I just narratively like more.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. Like the song was okay, and they did that same song twice basically, but like there wasn't like a standout song. It was okay. It was all right. But but it was cute moments made up for it. And like you said, Doc being just awesome and crazy.
That was just a great subplot. That was a great B plot.
I like heavy Doc plots. We don't get much of that probably.
That's true.
Yeah, kind of a middling episode, but pretty good.
Episode.
Yeah, decent.
I like how you and I have not like disliked a Fraggle Rock episode yet, so it's going to get really hard when we get to the end of the season.
There has been like, oh my God, I'll have to recap them much harder than the other ones to remember. Like, well, was there anything bad in that episode? Was it boring?
Yeah. Is that the one where they sang that song?
That one song that was slow? Oh,
and then there was another one later? It's all going to be that.
And the wiki on like the fan wiki of it doesn't do like Muppets where it explains every single scene. So it's going to be harder to remember. Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Well, this week, what are the silly creatures up to? Uncle Traveling Matt meets a sidewalk creature, which is actually a parking meter. He sort of laments that they can't move and they have to be fed by the silly creatures with metal disc food. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like parking meters. They were patented in 1928. The original version was designed to run off of the battery of the car that was parking there.
Oh, that's a lot of trust.
So you would hook up things, and that was how it powered. That did not work out, as it turns out. 1935 saw the first major success for parking meters, and then it went into mass production in 36. The original version had a spring mechanism with a coin receptacle and a countdown meter, kind of like what we grew up with, except for these older versions had to have a service person come through with a key every couple hours and wind the mechanism inside.
Like a watch.
It wasn't until what are called the McGee version that are the ones we know, where you put in the coins and then you as the operator turn, and that is what cranks the mechanism. Like the ones we grew up with. Those were, so the original version, a little guy had to go around and do a thing. And then most of the parking meters today are multi-space meters. Individual spaces are getting more and more rare, where they're, one thing covers 12 spaces. They run on dedicated lines or on solar power. They connect to mostly digital payments. So it's crazy how far those like pole creatures have come.
I never go anywhere anymore, so I don't use them.
So that's what those silly creatures are up to this week. Jarman, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment this week?
I thought it was really well done with the catapult, both with the doozer scene and then also with the Fraggles at the end, and then catapulting Boober into the door. I mean, that was it looked like it was a plastic spoon almost that they used. But yeah, I just thought it was well made and well done. They had to make it just for this episode. But props wise, the blower machine was probably the biggest achievement of this episode at the end. That was insane with the trumpet thing in the top and everything. That was a lot. What about you?
So mine is much more subtle, we'll say. So it was at the end when they're singing Feel So Glad, that big final number, and all the Fraggles are getting in, they're clapping and stuff. And then there's a Fraggle with like a rock and roll lute. And he does this like little thing with his hand where he like stretches it and then he goes, and like goes in and pretends to play a lute. For some reason, that was so enchanting to me.
The stretch of the fingers first too.
It was that little like, yeah. And then he went for it. I was like, oh my God.
Rock it out, Fraggle.
So that one subtle moment was my favorite Muppeteering moment of the entire.
That's fair.
So, Jordan, what happened this week's episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation?
Oh, it's a classic that many remember for one reason or another, but it's the Outrageous Okona. The Enterprise is on its way to a mission, but along the way it finds a cargo ship that's under distress, and they're able to make contact with its captain, Okona, who is a handsome, mischievous guy who's in need of a part to repair his ship. So they tow his ship and bring him on board, and he immediately starts banging everyone on the Enterprise, every single person. He's in no rush to have his ship fixed. He's having a grand old time. But suddenly, ships from two nearby planets very aggressively approach the Enterprise, saying that they each want Okona for themselves as he has committed crimes on their separate planets. The people from Alltech say that he has impregnated one of their women, Yanar, and then bolted from his responsibilities. And the people on Strawleb say that he stole a state treasure, the Jewel of Thessia. And both the leaders in these ships seem to know each other, and they start arguing with each other and Picard over who should get Okona. But Okona, of course, denies all these charges, but doesn't offer any evidence to defend himself. He's just being like, whatever, I didn't do it. I'm going to go bang some more people. Meanwhile, Data is really curious about humor and how all the crew seems to think Okona is super funny. So he goes to the holodeck to study humor and brings up a hologram of a 1960s-ish style comedian, 70s maybe, who tries to give him lessons, played by Joe Piscopo. But he just teaches him super hackneyed jokes that no one thinks is funny, including Guinan, who's trying to help him learn what funny is. Meanwhile, the two leaders come on board to the Enterprise to argue their case to Picard. And Okona surprisingly says, he's like, you know what? I am the father of Yanar's unborn child, and I'll marry her if you want me to. But then the young man that's with the Altec people named Benzan protests. And he says the jewels of Thessia were never stolen, and Okona was just acting as a go-between between him and Yanar. And he is in love with her, and he wanted to gift the jewel of Thessia as a wedding gift, and that she is pregnant with his child. Jerry Springer episode right here. Apparently, Okona was on his way to deliver the jewel when he had engine trouble. And Yanar is just frustrated with all of them at this point. But Okona calms her down, and he convinces her to marry Benzan. And this kind of placates the arguing leaders somewhat, and Okona is then set free with his repaired ship. But then Data makes everyone laugh unintentionally at the end of the episode with some comment that he makes, and it makes him further bewildered by what exactly humor is, because why are they laughing? I didn't tell a joke. So, yeah, that's the end of the Outrageous Okona. What'd you think of this episode, Steve?
So some things I liked. It was cool to see a different type of ship that just wasn't one that we've seen already. Like, it was nice to go like, oh, thank God, some production value.
Oh, his cargo ship or whatever?
The cargo ship and the other ships that came in.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
I think we've seen any of those before. They were simpler models. Like, I admit that, but it was so nice to see, like, oh, thank God there's not like 6 ships in the galaxy. It felt like this was really supposed to be Harry Mudd. In some way, this felt very, like, the charismatic role and being able to roll through situations just felt very Harry Muddish. I like that for once they invited a stranger onto the ship and then actually set limits on where they were able to go and what they were able to do.
They've learned their lesson, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. They just keep doing it. Okona felt kind of Kirk-esque in that he just walked in and like immediately seduced a woman just because she existed.
Yep.
So that was interesting. I did like the Okona and Data angle. I thought that was the best duo in the show so far, and I like that it drove Data's B plot, their interaction.
Somebody with 0 charisma and somebody with a ton of charisma.
Right. But it was him trying to like emulate Okona and seeing how the crew responded to Okona, and clearly a desire to have that be him.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed the B plot in general. Data discovering jokes. I don't think it was paced very well. I did wrote Joe Piscopo.
Yeah.
And then afterwards I put, and the most likable he has ever been. Is this episode.
He was terrible on SNL, but
and then some things I struggled with. I hated that they identified Okona as a rogue. Like, they literally said it out loud. He's like, what's a rogue? And they literally defined it. I was like, guys.
I put that in mind too, that it's like, you don't need, just show us, don't tell us. Like, they just really weirdly explain what a rogue is. And look, he's very roguish and mischievous, blah, 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 blah.
There was too much Han Solo in it. I get that there's only so many archetypes to play, but it really read Han Solo.
Yeah.
There were a couple times that I don't know why there was really bad dubbing on Okona a few times.
Oh, I didn't notice.
For no reason. And it was towards the beginning. And I couldn't figure out why. So probably a mic gave out or something, and they had to fix it. I feel like the portion with Joe Piscopo comic went on way too long. And it would have been better if there were multiple smaller visits sort of building what he was learning or something.
Or I would have loved the different eras of comics. That would have been fun. Like, show more than one comic that he tries out,
Yeah, just anything to break it up a little bit and give him some more range in there. I feel like Guinan lost her edge. That's the thing I really liked about Guinan, was that she was really pushy and kind of proddy, and she didn't have any of that this episode. So I'm not sure what happened.
Well, generally she's more, I guess, going forward, more mysterious and kind of gently pushing you in the direction you need to go, as opposed to the way she was in that first episode where she was kind of like really kind of pushy,
There was a scene where they sent Worf to find Okona, and they play really intense, serious music as we watch Worf walk through 3 hallways. It was one of the weirdest choices I have seen. if you can find it, it's just incredible. It is just Worf walking with really intense music behind it.
It's called Time Filler.
Nothing else is happening. I thought that Okona's suggestion just to leave was a bit weird in general. And the fact that they said that fixing his system would be a really easy thing, it really seemed to take forever.
That's true.
So that was strange. And then I was not enchanted by how conveniently it worked out. You love each other, but I was taking her to visit you. And then I was like, oh my God, please.
It was a Romeo and Juliet that ended up in a good way.
Yeah, I guess, with some third party jagoff. So I don't know. I think this is going to end up in the middle for me. I was not nearly, I think, as enchanted with Okona as they wanted me to be.
Well, only because they kept saying it so much. Like, if they just let it be, he would have been more, yeah, he's pretty enchanting. But then, like, they kept saying, look how charming he is. See? I'm like, okay,
Dana's
we get
going
it.
to do comedy lessons because of him.
It's like, all right, just show us. Like, now he seems less impressive because you're saying how cool he is.
He's sleeping with more female crew members. Isn't he cool?
Oh. I did put that. I think if he was miscast, this episode would have been much worse. Like, if it was somebody who is less charming, as Billy Campbell plays him, who's Bruce Campbell's brother, by the way, he played the Rocketeer back in the day. Yeah. But yeah, he's a Rocketeer. He was in the 4400, I think, that TV show. But he's a very charming, likable guy, and so he delivered these kind of cheesy lines in a way that they made them actually work. If there was some lesser actor, I think this episode would have just completely like bombed. Because then it like all that buildup they make of how cool he is just really wouldn't work. It
would have been lame.
Yeah,
really
it's like
lame.
He's not that cool. But I did like that he didn't turn out to be a bad guy in the end, because we get so many people come on the ship and are just bad people every single time.
And he didn't try to steal anything other than hearts.
And virginities.
Yes, space virginity.
Space virginity. Yeah, and I already mentioned about Joe Piscopo. Some of the moments were funny, some were kind of cringy, hackney stuff, but and also like the stakes were pretty low, so there's not much to get much excited about in this episode. It's like, well, they
did clarify very early that the stakes were incredibly low. Like, they took time to explain it.
Oh, the ships have lasers that can't affect the ships.
Yeah, they've got phase 2 lasers. They could shoot at us for 1,000,000 years.
I love that line. That has always stuck out with me, just to show a little bit how impressive the Enterprise is. That like these ships that are still traveling in space, which is cool, they can not even compare to the Enterprise and how strong it is. Like, it can destroy a planet if it wanted to. So like, yeah, I kind of like that line. Yeah, because it puts that out there.
But yeah, they really lower it there.
Yep. Like, there's no danger here. We're fine. We just got to figure this shit out, this political crap.
I know that the characters are never really in danger, but they're really not in danger this week, guys.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think a little fun, silly, middling episode as well. Yeah, I think both of these were kind of like that.
Yeah, I think they're both going to fall in that mid somewhere. I agree with that.
Definitely decent. So we got some Trek facts here. Billy Campbell, who I mentioned, Bruce Campbell's brother, who played Okona, was originally one of the top contenders for Commander Riker. He was Gene Roddenberry's preferred choice for the role, but the studio outbid him and got him. They wanted Jonathan Frakes instead. He was already working on a soap opera at the time, and they're like, "No, we want Jonathan Frakes. He's going to be a heartthrob." According to some sources, Jerry Lewis was invited to play the holodeck comic. But the role eventually went to Joe Piscopo instead, who did a Lewis impersonation, basically. And
yeah, I could see that.
You might have recognized the first person that Okona seduces. That was the transporter operator, Robinson. That was played by Terry Hatcher. Later on, goes to play what's the Lois and Clark, and she's in Dangerous Housewives, or whatever that show was. Desperate Housewives. Guinan says the line, "You're a droid and I'm annoyed," talking about her being humanoid and being annoyed. That joke might be the only time in the history of Star Trek where they abbreviate android with droid, because that is much more commonly used in the Star Wars universe. So that's like the only time you'll hear that on Star Trek, basically calling someone a droid. And the fact that Guinan coaches Data in comedy is something of an inside joke on the show, because Whoopi Goldberg was a stand-up comic for a couple of decades, so she kind of knows what she's talking about. When Okona goes to meet the transporter crew member for a rendezvous at her quarters, the second chick we see him on screen having sex with, the door is marked 080669. The last two digits of the room appearing to be a wink at what he was expected to happen when the door's closed, because it says 69 at the end. Very nice. But yeah, that is our Trek facts. I think there's some Trek connections.
That's right. Well, this week, the comic Joe Piscopo was featured on the George Burns Comedy Week, an anthology-style comedy series hosted by George Burns, who was a guest star of The Muppet Show.
Mm-hmm.
George Burns. Benson was played by a guy named Kieran Mulroney. He went on to be a writer, including the 2017 Power Rangers reboot.
Whoa.
Where Rita Repulsa was played by Elizabeth Banks, and she starred as herself in a 2015 pilot episode for The Muppets.
Oh, wow. That's a good connection.
Bam, all over that.
Small guy on the show, too.
Captain Thaddeum Okona, actor Billy Campbell from The Rocketeer. Also in that was Alan Arkin, who played the tour guide at the Muppet Studios in the 2011 The Muppets.
Wow.
And then Yanar was played by Rosalind Allen, but she was the lead in Pinocchio's Revenge.
We watched that on the show.
Which also features puppets. Like
she was the lead in Pinocchio's Revenge?
God, how did I make that jump? Hold on. Now I'm looking at my notes and I can't figure this out.
That same actress, when we watched that terrible movie with Corey Feldman, was that the same one? No, he was in Puppet Master that we watched with that. I forgot.
Yeah, that was. Oh, I forgot he was in that.
Corey Feldman.
Yeah, Rosalind Allen was in Pinocchio's Revenge.
Wow, what a terrible movie that was. It was so great.
I don't know where Jennifer Garrett came from. I can't even find my reference to that. But yeah, Pinocchio's Revenge, which is a puppet. Well, it makes sense. They're both basically the same episode.
Same episode.
Both feature two different sides, not really knowing what the other one has planned. Deben and Kushel, or whatever the hell his name is, both being after Okona, but not knowing the various dubious reasons.
Oh, and the other one being?
I'm tired. No, the two groups coming together, one with the spilt milk and the other one with the trebuchet, but like not knowing they're happening until they just collide.
I only gave you a hard time with it because I have the same similarity. I was like, oh yeah, I did the same one.
You should have just snaked that shit from me.
So what's your next one, Steve? I already told you mine.
Both feature endings that are far too convenient. The two lovebirds working it out, and Okona being the man between them, and then Boober falling on the catapult and getting launched to the wall, and Gobo's escape.
That's true.
Far too convenient.
Both have a character going to another space, expecting to do one thing, but getting trapped there. Okona trying to escape with the Enterprise, only to be trapped by the planets warring over him and take him as prisoner. And Gobo going to outer space to get a postcard, only to be trapped by the boarded over hole in the wall.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Both feature people getting bad advice. The trash heap telling the Fraggles not to cry over spilt milk and them thinking that's great advice. And the comic just telling Data terrible routines.
Awful jokes.
Bad advice.
Oh, God, what's that noise?
Transporter malfunction.
All right, so time of the episode where we transport one character from one episode to the other and then vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
Trek to Rock this week. I'm going to bring over Counselor Troy to replace Moki. Just kind of wandering around singing worried songs while she empathically absorbs all that around her.
And helps no one.
Oh.
Gobo. Trek to Rock. I'm going to have Okona come over and take the place of the trash heap. He'd give all the Fraggles all this mischievous advice to solve their problems, but it would actually be good-natured and actually work, unlike the trash heap's advice.
He is very likable.
It's true.
Rock to Trek, I'm going to bring over the trash heap to replace the comic, filling Data with one-liners and zingers as her two little Gunge and Philo like throw zingers at him too.
I had a similar one, but a little different. I'm going to have Doc take the place of the comic. He would tell the best family-friendly puns to Data, and the whole crew would love them.
All while making this crazy contraption.
Stay right there, Data. I'm going to tell you in a second. It's a great joke. I heard it from Kermit the other day.
Kermit, he wrote it to me in a letter.
Well, that brings us to the end of episode 132 of the MuppeTrek Podcast.
Join us next time for Fraggle Rock episode, Catch the Tail by the Tiger.
And Star Trek Next Generation episode, Loud as a Whisper.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.